run. We got Ty running the board, Devin running the camera, and a very good interview with Ms. Virginia Fox, 5th District Congresswoman. Enjoyed that. And we're going to go ahead and turn it to Brian with our first news segment. But before we do that, we want to thank our sponsors. We don't have the commercials up and running. Alice Plumbing, Sharps Hardware. We want to thank you so much for sponsoring the broadcast. Anyone else that would like to get involved, please contact WSIC, the radio station here.
This is from the market ticker, June 15, 2009. This is an opinionated perspective on the American people. We have seen the largest looting operation in history perpetrated against the American people. Over $5 trillion in junk securities were marketed and sold. They had real value of about $2 trillion. The other trillion was roughly pure fiction. The banks created and sold these throughout the world with full knowledge and the support of Congress, the Fed, and the banks themselves. It was pure fraud. Granting someone a mortgage based on only whether they can fog a mirror is proof positive of malfeasance. Unless you disclose this fact to the buyers of these securities, a fact that was not disclosed until after the securities blew up. Americans have sat on their butts through all of this, allowed their 401ks, IRAs to be trashed, their supposed home values to be pumped and destroyed, their hopes, dreams, employment, aspirations, futures, and homes have all vanished into the ether of fraud. When this came to light, the banks went to Congress and, supported by the Fed's intentional draining of liquidity to create an imminent crisis, they got $700 billion bailout bill passed, one that you, your children, and grandchildren will have to pay for. The government then passed another near $1 trillion stimulus bill, claimed to hold employment to 8%. It did not, because it was yet another papering over of the fraud, but that bill, your children, grandchildren, along with you, will also pay. Your savings accounts and your CDs now yield an effective 0. Your credit card interest rates have gone from 11 to 29%. Also, the banks can keep granting ill-advised credit to people who can't pay. Those who can pay, the rest of you, are being jacked for 30% a year in interest. We have seen a few tea parties in which a few people showed up and which were immediately panned by those in power as terrorists. Contrast with this. A few days ago, Iran held an election. It was alleged there was a massive fraud. The current president claimed victory under less than clear circumstances. The people said no and took to the streets in mass demonstrations. Almost 2 million people out of a population of 70 million, roughly, the 1 in 35 Iranians in the entire nation, took to the streets to demand justice in a simple vote. More strikingly, Tehran has a population of roughly 12 million. This means 1 in 6 citizens of the city have taken to the streets. This, despite the fact that the Iranian population does not enjoy a Second Amendment and thus is forced to fight a rogue government with makeshift Molotov cocktails, rocks, and clubs, should that rogue government choose to shoot. And this was about an election, a president, one man. In our nation, we've literally had 1/3 of our GDP, that is 1/3 of everything you worked for last year, stolen by a bunch of fraudsters with the explicit cooperation and assistance of the government. We should be seeing tens of millions of Americans literally closing down Washington, D.C. with peaceful protests in the streets.
Amen.
Making the entirety of downtown inaccessible to vehicles and the normal conduct of business impossible. Were Americans to display the same sort of anger over an insult vastly more serious than the one once served upon the Iranian people? Where are you, America? In America, if the government turns into a goon squad, you should have the constitutionally protected ability to shoot back. In Iran, you have no such ability, as the Iranian government has never recognized the unalienable right set forth in our declaration. So in Iran, the population risks mass death to protest. In America, the population risks the loss of some income since you'd have to take the day off from work. The Iranians take to the streets, we take to our couches and have another beer. The people of Iran are putting us to shame.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. The apathy of the American people while they're being robbed and looted is just amazing. And in Iran, and I'm just speculating. I don't know what's happening in Iran, but it's always been my assumption that whoever is the president in Iran is the puppet of the Ayatollah.
Exactly. I've heard of him described as more like the president of a company, and the Ayatollahs are more like the board of directors.
It's kind of like the President Obama is the puppet of the international bankers.
Exactly. There really isn't much difference. If anything, Ahmadinejad might actually have more power than Obama.
Yeah, so, and again, just so people take a look at things with open eyes, when you're seeing these protests and 5% of the population speaks English, but all of the signs are in English, it's like us having our Tea Party event July 4th and making our signs in Chinese or something. I don't understand. And the people they interview speak perfect English, so it's all being staged for the Western media.
Like I was discussing with you last night there in Baghdad when they ripped down the big statue of Saddam Hussein, that was all staged. I mean, the BBC would have had you believe there was 1 million civilians there, when in reality there was maybe a few hundred journalists and members of the United States military there. That was the crowd.
Well, while we're on this point, and we've got about 4 minutes left, you know how I'm always saying the media is corporate-owned and a puppet, and we get some email asking, why do you say that? How can you back that up? This and that. This year, the Pulitzer Prize winner for journalism, for investigative reporting, was awarded last month to David Barstow of the New York Times. But no one out there listening knew this. Now, I'll tell you how come you didn't know. But you didn't hear a word about this from the TV or the cable networks. The reason for their silence is obvious. They did not want you to know what Barstow revealed. That the networks have been active participants in a Pentagon-sponsored propaganda campaign intended to sell the Iraq and Afghanistan wars, amongst other things, to the American public. In the words of the Pulitzer Prize Committee, Barstow's prize was for his tenacious reporting that revealed how some retired generals working as radio and television analysts had been co-opted by the Pentagon to make its case for the Iraq War, and how many of them also had undisclosed ties to companies that benefited from the policies they defended. The prize-winning stories appeared in the New York Times on April 20th, 2008 and November 29th, 2008, and were the product of a 3-year Freedom of Information effort to wrench documents of the propaganda effort out of the Department of Defense. Barstow revealed Pentagon documents that repeatedly referred to the military analysts as message force multipliers or surrogates who could be counted on to deliver administration themes and messages to the millions of Americans as if it was their own opinions. The Pentagon-controlled pundits, most of them retired generals, were given hundreds of classified Pentagon briefings, provided with Pentagon-approved talking points, and flown at Pentagon expense to Iraq and other sites. But this extraordinary access came with a condition. Participants were instructed not to quote their briefers directly or otherwise describe their contacts with the Pentagon. In their television appearances, the military analysts did not disclose their ties to the Pentagon, let alone that they were its surrogates. The military analysts were little more than puppets for the Pentagon, in the words of Robert S. Belev, a retired Green Beret who was a Fox News military analyst. It was them saying, we need to stick our hands up and back and move your mouth for you. This is proof that our media is nothing but a puppet. These people were puppets of the Pentagon. They were given their script, and they fed the American people exactly what the Bush administration wanted them to say. We do not have a real media. If you want truth in America, you've got to go to the alternative media or foreign media, because CNN, Fox News, the rest, this is proof. You do not know who won the Pulitzer Prize for Journalism this year, because the story that he came out with, they do not want you to hear about. Your comments, Brian?
Yeah, that's an amazing story. You were just telling me about that last night. It takes a lot to really shock me to any degree, but that was really amazing.
Rock Creek Free Press. If you want a real newspaper, Rock Creek Free Press, contact us on there, therealnewsradio.com. I get 25 copies a month, give you one, tell you how to get involved with it. They report real news. If it hadn't been for this paper, I would not have known about this. I saw it nowhere else. That's how big this cover-up was. And again, just think about it, people. the people that come on Fox News, CNN, are telling you why we need to be in the war, justifying it, legitimizing it, are nothing but puppets of the government. You're being fed propaganda, just like you were taught Soviet Russia was.
Exactly, that's what I was thinking, yeah.
Go with it.
Well, I mean, we grew up thinking, Soviet-style propaganda media.
Exactly, and that's where we're at in America. Sad day in America. We're coming up on a break. Next hour, more news. We'll be taking your phone calls. You're listening to The Real News with Farron and Brian. Back in 6 minutes.